Okay. Okay. So on behalf of all of the members and friends of the Santa Monica Karma Thegsum Chöling Center, I want to thank all of you for being here this evening to talk about mantra practice in general and Chenrezig compassion mantra practice in particular. Before I get started to talk to you tonight, I'd like to recite a short prayer of taking refuge. And in this prayer, I'll be reciting taking refuge in the Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the path, and the Sangha as the community. I'll recite it once in Tibetan and then once in English. And so that will be our time together to place our mind toward awakening and toward the awakening of others. So here we go. O Sanje Chudan Soji Chonamla Jangchu Pardu Dani Kyapsuchi Daji Jinsoji Pe Sunanki Drola Penshir Sanje Drupasho. Now in English, in the Buddha, his teaching, and the order most excellent, we take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may we attain Buddhahood for the sake of all that lives. Now I'll recite one more short prayer to the gurus of the lineage, and then we'll begin. O Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Dagi Chiwar Pede Den Shula Kadrin Jembo Gone Je Sunte Kusun Tuging Udrup Sal Du Sol. Okay, thank you. I don't know what to say except to say thank you to all of you for coming this evening and for your interest in Chenrezig. This will be the first of several 1-hour classes about the Chenrezig practice, in which I will share what I've learned about it and hope that it will be of help to you as well. I think it's, I have to say at the beginning that I am really delighted to be joining you on a Thursday evening. And that is because when the Columbus Karma Thegsum Chöling first started meeting back in 1977 in Columbus, Ohio, we met in the living room of a professor, and his name was Royal Tyler, and I've heard he's still alive, and he was teaching, last I heard, in Australia. And we were meeting in his living room, and we were reciting the Chenrezig practice. He was a professor at Ohio State University, and he was welcoming to Buddhists, and he wanted to become a Buddhist himself. And so he was the first host for Columbus Karma Thegsum Chöling. It was marvelous. And we had no idea what we were reciting. We had somewhat of an idea of the meaning of the words, but not much. We mostly thought about the mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, and we were told that the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum gave us some of the power of compassion, of the heart of compassion, and that by reciting the mantra, we would develop our heart of compassion. And so every Thursday night, we would be in his living room with him and his wife and our other friends reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, not really understanding much about it at all, but we had confidence that because our teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, told us that Chenrezig practice was a powerful means of developing compassion, we trusted that, and we practiced that because he said it would be good. And it was sort of like children taking vitamins because their parents said, "Oh, this will make you healthy." So we recited the mantra thinking that it would make us more loving, kind, and sane. So I remember that often on Friday mornings, I worked in an office at that time, and that my coworkers in the office would often say, we like you better on Friday mornings because we know that you've been meditating the night before. So it was that Chenrezig was one of my first experiences of meditation. Chanting practice was the first meditation that I did. So I'm happy to be sharing this with you now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a tiny bit of background in history on the practice, and then we will slowly walk through the short practice of Chenrezig, learning the visualizations as we go. My teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, said, "Yes, I know that it is customary for people who receive the Chenrezig instruction to have first taken refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and also to have received the reading transmission of the Chenrezig practice and mantra." He said, "But I'm thinking that at this time in history, we need as much compassion as we can get. So he said, don't worry about whether people have taken refuge, and don't worry about whether they have the reading transmission or not." He said, Chenrezig practice is so good for people, and there's no way it could possibly hurt them. He said, so I think that you're fine to teach it even to very beginning people, very beginning students. You can teach Chenrezig. So I'm going to take that as a blessing from our teacher and founder, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, and that is what I'm going to be using as my guide this evening. I'm going to be doing a little bit of screen sharing here in a moment. And while I'm setting this up, if anybody has questions that they would like to make sure they get answered during these classes, you can raise your hand and Max will recognize you, and you can ask your questions while I'm setting up the visual aid here.
Lama Kathy, there was one question in the chat from Daniel. He says, I would like to ask a question about sadhana and the importance of being good at visualization.
Okay, very good. I will make a note of that right here. Okay. Good at visualization. Yeah. Oh yeah, we will definitely cover this. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll make sure that it's covered, but yes, it's in the outline, so we're good. Any other questions? Okay. Seems like we do not have other questions. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, then I will go ahead and begin. I want to begin by introducing you to Chenrezig, the bodhisattva of compassion. I have a small verse that I would like to share with you that was spoken by Khenpo Tsultrim Jamso about Chenrezig practice. And then this, I think, will help a little bit. And I'll make sure that that all of you get, I'll send this to the folks here, in Santa Monica, and they can maybe make it available on their website or something of that nature so that people can see it. Let's see, here it is. Okay. It's a poem. Emptiness has compassion for a heart. This is the real Chenrezig. The Chenrezig with a face and arms is just a mere appearance. Use your practice of the merely apparent Chenrezig to realize the true nature, the true Chenrezig. Khenpo Tsultrim Gyaltsen, who has retired from teaching now, was really a brilliant scholar who had a knack for taking complex subjects and making them simple and easy to understand. And this verse is a very powerful reminder of how easy and difficult mantra practice can be. It can be very easy to connect to because everybody loves chanting and singing, and it speaks to people in a real way. And also it can be very complex because it can help us to understand complex ideas. And so for many people, the idea of emptiness is very difficult to understand. And so one of the things we'll be talking about in this class will be, what is emptiness and why is it part of Buddhist philosophy? And how is it that compassion and emptiness are related? How are emptiness and compassion related? So we'll talk about that. And the idea is that this is the real Chenrezig, is that emptiness and compassion together are the essence of Chenrezig, or the heart of Chenrezig. And there is a Chenrezig that has a face and arms, which we'll see shortly when we look at a picture of Chenrezig, the bodhisattva of compassion. And so he is saying that the real Chenrezig is emptiness and compassion, but the Chenrezig that appears with a face and arms, it's just an appearance in this illusory world. An illusory appearance in the illusory world. But then he said, he joins these two ideas. Use your practice of the merely apparent Chenrezig to realize your true nature, the true Chenrezig. So he's saying that compassion and emptiness are part of our Buddha nature. And that by practicing the Chenrezig, who is an appearance with face and arms, by practicing this, we can come to understand our true nature of emptiness and compassion. That's a tall order, as we would say. That's a lot to ask, but I feel that we have this potential to understand it. I'll go ahead and copy this and put it in the chat for you so that you can have a copy of it for yourself. I'll also try to provide a copy of this to the organizers here so that they can share it with everybody in another format. So you can grab that and copy that. And we'll also provide it in another way for you. So, who is Chenrezig? Who is Chenrezig? So let's start with that. You hear about Chenrezig in the sutras of the Buddha. The sutras of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Mahayana sutras of Shakyamuni, they talk about the bodhisattva Mahasattva. And they talk about him under his Sanskrit name. I'm going to pull up a little, this will be my whiteboard. And then it's like my blackboard, only it's white. So who is Chenrezig? He is also known as Avalokiteshvara. And he appears in the sutras, the Mahayana sutras, as he's known as the bodhisattva, Mahasattva. In other words, the great being. That's what Maha means, great, and Sattva means being. So the Mahasattva, the great being Chenrezig, or the great being Avalokiteshvara. Bodhi, what does Bodhi mean? Bodhi means awakened, like the Buddha, awakened from the sleep of ignorance, awakened from confusion and delusion, awakened to the truth of enlightenment. So a person who is a bodhisattva is a person, there's two kinds of bodhisattvas. There are the accomplished and enlightened beings who become enlightened through love and service to others. They practice love and compassion to the extent that their selfishness disappears and they become enlightened. And when their selfishness disappears and they become enlightened, they work for the benefit of beings forever in the form of a bodhisattva, an enlightened bodhisattva. That's one kind of bodhisattva. The other kind of bodhisattva are people like you and me, people who are imperfect, people who want to become Buddhas. And so we practice the practices of a bodhisattva. We try to practice love. We try to practice compassion. We try to practice what are called the 6 perfect virtues: generosity and ethics, patience, diligence, meditation, and wisdom. We try to practice these 6 perfect virtues and become Buddhas ourselves. So there's the accomplished bodhisattvas, and then there are the bodhisattvas in training, or the aspiring bodhisattvas. So we're the bodhisattvas in training, the aspiring bodhisattvas. We use the practices of the bodhisattvas to remove our selfishness and to accomplish our own awakening, and also the awakening of others. So he's known as Avalokiteshvara in the Mahayana Sutras. But what does his name mean? Avalokiteshvara. The meaning is the one who hears the cries of the world. He is the one who hears the cries of the world. He is aware of the suffering of the world. The Sanskrit name has that meaning. But there's also the Tibetan name. The one who sees the suffering of the world. Chen is the honorific word for eye, the organ of sight. And Rezik means that he is looking continuously. So he is always aware of the sufferings of the world. And this is because in the sutras, the stories that are told about Avalokiteshvara in the sutras were that when he first generated the mind of awakening, meaning that he took the vow of bodhicitta, or the mind of awakening, and vowed to attain enlightenment. He did so in a very special way. he said he vowed to remain in samsara, to remain present in samsara. The word samsara was coined to mean the ocean of suffering that the Buddha described the world as being. He would be present in samsara until all beings had been awakened, had become awakened. That's a pretty brave vow. You could say he was the most compassionate of all the bodhisattvas because he vowed to stay in samsara until all beings were liberated. And of course, the story goes that he said, I take this vow, and all of the other aspiring bodhisattvas bowed in his direction because of his bravery. And so there are lots of stories in the sutras about Chenrezig or Avalokiteshvara. And one of the stories is that his guru, Amitabha Buddha, was his advisor in all things. And so when Avalokiteshvara checked to see how things were going, because he was trying to liberate all beings from samsara, and he became very discouraged. And he said, if I should ever lose my courage, may my body break into 1,000 pieces. That's the story, the way the story is told. And so, of course, it happened. He became discouraged, and his body broke into 1,000 pieces. And then his guru, Amitabha Buddha, reassembled him and gave him his vow, but he reassembled him with 1,000 arms and 11 heads so that he could be looking in all directions and see all beings and act in ways that were very skillful to benefit them. So whether these stories appeal to you or not, the idea of any being who would take the vow of remaining in samsara, and he would be present with us in samsara forever, essentially, for as long as it takes, that is great bravery, and it is great compassion. So that is how he became known as the great compassionate one. So his guru Amitabha Buddha gave him his vow, his bodhisattva vow. So that's a little bit about who Chenrezig is in the sutras. And there's one more thing that you'll know about the bodhisattva Chenrezig, and that is that he is known as the speaker of the Heart Sutra. Those of you who have ever recited the Heart Sutra will know that the Heart Sutra was actually spoken by the main teaching in the Heart Sutra was spoken by Avalokiteshvara. And so the teaching given in the Heart Sutra was spoken by him. And the Buddha was actually sitting in deep meditation. And as the Buddha was sitting in deep meditation, his deep meditation touched his bodhisattva disciple Avalokiteshvara and touched his arhat disciple Shariputra, and inspired Shariputra to ask Avalokiteshvara, how should a son or daughter of noble family train in the perfection of wisdom? And that is when Avalokiteshvara began to speak. And he answered the question by saying, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. There is no other form than emptiness. There is no other emptiness than form. And then he continued to give the Heart Sutra teaching. And at the conclusion of the teaching, the Buddha arises from his deep meditation and says, oh, it is just as you have said, it is just as you have said. And so the Buddha then endorses the teaching given by Avalokiteshvara. So in this way, the Heart Sutra then is attributed to Avalokiteshvara, who obviously was a deeply practicing bodhisattva. So this is the bodhisattva of Chenrezig that is spoken of in literature, in legend, and in the sutras. So this is the Chenrezig that is spoken of in the second verse of Khenpo Sultram's poem. And so this is the Chenrezig with a face and arms. And in fact, this is an iconographic representation of the Bodhisattva Chenrezig. And you can see, sort of just in iconography, some of the attributes of compassion. He is depicted as being made of light, and his body shines with the 5 colors, but mainly white light. And every aspect of his body has symbolism. The 4 arms stand for love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, which are the 4 immeasurables. Love and compassion, a joy and equanimity. And in his central hands, he's holding a jewel, and the jewel is symbolic of our Buddha nature, our basic nature of enlightenment, which, like a wish-fulfilling gem, if we realize our Buddha nature and become enlightened ourselves, that will answer and fulfill all the wishes for ourselves and for all beings. That's why the Buddha nature is symbolized by a jewel. And in his outer left hand, he's holding, his outer right hand, he is holding a rosary of beads. This is symbolic of his compassion, which is so complete that no being is left out. The figure 8 also symbolizes infinity in the Tibetan tradition. And so the idea is that it has no end. His compassion has no end. And his outer left hand is holding a lotus flower, which is symbolic of the bodhisattva, who remains in this world, but is not stained by the world, just as a lotus flower is rooted in the mud, but blooms above it. And then he is depicted as wearing silks and jewels. There are 13 different ornaments that he is wearing between his clothing and the crown and so forth. And these 13 ornaments symbolize the 13 levels of bodhisattva awakening that are spoken of in the tantras. He has beautiful black hair, which symbolizes the awakening mind, or the mind, the awakened mind. It is in, half of it is in a top knot at the top of his head, meaning that enlightenment is singular, but the rest of it flows on his shoulders. And that symbolizes that the manifestations of enlightenment are many. It is one thing, and yet its manifestations are many. His feet are sitting in what's known in yoga as the lotus posture, but in Tibetan Buddhism is called the Vajra posture. And it is an unmoving posture, which means he is unmoving from the state of awakening. On his left shoulder, there is a deer skin. And before you ask, no, he did not go hunting. It's a symbolic garment. It's symbolic of the kind of compassion he has, because he is actually wearing the skin of a Krishna Sara deer, which is a legendary animal. You could call it South Asia's unicorn. Because if you remember the unicorn, the fictional animal of the Western tradition, it's said to be so compassionate that wherever it is, there is peace. And this is also the symbolism of the Krishnasara deer, that it is so peaceful and loving and kind that it will lay down its life to benefit others. And this is the symbolism of this ornament. He's wearing the 5-jeweled crown, which is symbolic of enlightenment, because the 5 wisdoms have arisen with the exhaustion of the 5 poisons. So each one of these jewels symbolizes the purification of one of the 5 negative mental states, which are, as we know from our teachings, ignorance, attachment, aversion, jealousy, and pride. So the 3 mental poisons that we all know are, we know ignorance, attachment, and aversion, but to these are added jealousy and pride. And these 5 jewels show that he has overcome these 5 negative states and turned them into the seed of the 5 wisdoms. And there are 2 more aspects of his being. The moon disk that he is sitting on is symbolic of compassion, and the lotus flower is symbolic of love, loving kindness and compassion. So they are his seat. He also has a beautiful moon disk as his backrest. So that's a little bit about the stories that are told about Chenrezig, about his legendary compassion, and a little bit about who he is in the sutras, and a little bit about the iconography. So that was a lot of information. So you might be a little bit tired now. So maybe we should take some questions, see if you have any questions about what we've talked about so far. Yes, yeah, please, feel welcome to unmute and ask your question.
So he was the first Buddha that wanted to stay and make sure that, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, he was the first bodhisattva who made that particular, that particular aspiration. And that's why he was viewed as such an exceptional aspiring bodhisattva, because I mean, right. talk about a brave wish.
Right, I know.
Essentially, he said, I'm going to stay behind and turn out the light.
Oh, right.
Sorry, it's completely emptied, right? I mean, it's like, I'm
Yeah.
staying until then, right? Yeah, it's really something, isn't it? He's also not entirely unique in making extraordinary aspirations. The other example that I can think of is the Bodhisattva Tara. When she made her aspiration for awakening, the monastics who were with her said, "Oh, you should really aspire to be reborn as a man, because after all, you're a woman, and that's not as good." And so she said, I make the aspiration that I will only ever appear as a woman, and I will achieve enlightenment in the body of a woman. So, sort of like, so there, gentlemen.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So, there are these stories of really, really unique aspirations that these bodhisattvas make, right? And so the medicine Buddha made the aspiration that when I become a Buddha, may my name itself relieve illness and things like this. So that's why when he became a Buddha and so forth. And the Buddha Amitabha, when he was an aspiring bodhisattva, made the extraordinary aspiration that when he became a Buddha, he would manifest a pure realm that any being could enter just by wishing to be reborn there. So these unique and extraordinary aspirations came true when they became enlightened. And so you may say, well, wait a minute, I thought Chenrezig was only a 10th level bodhisattva. But if you read in Gampopa's book, The Jewel Ornament of Liberation, there's not much material difference between a 10th level bodhisattva and a fully awakened Buddha. So, it's a nominal, difference. But in any case, thanks for asking about that. It was an extraordinary. So here's the takeaway. Here's, my version of the takeaway from that is that it's really important that we ourselves be very sincere when we make our aspiration to become awakened, and that we not think that we could not be capable of benefiting others. We may not make extraordinary aspirations like they did, but we can at least make the aspiration that we can make, which is, may I benefit beings in every possible way when I become a Buddha. Just may my activity for beings be limitless. And that's something that Khenpo Rinpoche encouraged us to do, was when we took the Bodhisattva vow, to really mean it, to really be present with the aspiration and continuously make that aspiration every day and renew the Bodhisattva vow morning and evening, in order to just firm up the idea that we are going to try to benefit beings in whatever way we can. So he said, don't think that because you're not making extraordinary aspirations like these that you can't benefit beings. Of course you can, because that's how all things begin, with aspiration. So thanks for that question.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Well, then I guess it's time to talk a little bit about what visualization practice is all about. Why do we do mantra practice? Those of you who know a little bit about Buddhism will know that in the Tibetan tradition, we practice what some people call 3 yana Buddhism, or 3 vehicle Buddhism. In fact, the name of the Dharma Center, Karma Thegsum Chöling, the Thegsum in the name implies Tek means vehicle, Sum means 3. So Karma Thegsum Chöling is karma, refers to the Karmapa. Thegsum means 3 vehicles, and Chöling means Dharma place. So place of the Buddha's teaching of the 3 vehicles of the Karma Kagyu tradition. So Thegsum means 3 vehicles. And what does this mean? This means that we draw our practices from all 3 of the yanas of the Buddha's teaching. Now, when the Buddha taught those 45 years in India, he didn't start his lectures by saying, today I'm going to teach the Hinayana. Today I will teach the Mahayana. Today I will teach the Vajrayana. That's not how he did it. He just spoke spontaneously in answer to questions. And scholars later analyzed his teachings and saw the patterns that developed through those, and how skillful of a teacher he was, that he could present to different types of individuals. For those who were only interested in their own liberation from samsara. He taught the path of individual liberation, which some people call the Hinayana, or the smaller vehicle. And it's not smaller because it's not as good, according to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. He says it's just that the aspiration is just for oneself alone, for one's own liberation from samsara. Because, you have to start with yourself. And the main practice that we do at our Dharma Center from the Hinayana is the practice of shamatha meditation. The quiet sitting meditation that allows us to begin to tame our minds is taught as our basic Hinayana, or self-liberation practice. And by allowing our mind to come to rest, we learn about our minds and how our minds work. We see our patterns and begin to form the wish to change the negative patterns and increase the positive ones. This brings us into line with Buddhist ethics, because when we harm others, the Buddha taught, we ourselves create the cause for our own future harm. This is the law of karma. And so we learn about ethics and morality and karma in the Hinayana teachings. But the Buddha didn't stop there. He didn't just stop with teaching one's own liberation from suffering, the suffering of samsara. He also taught the vehicle that we now call the Mahayana, or the larger vehicle, which is not called larger because it's better. It's called larger because it includes all sentient beings. If the Hinayana is the vehicle for individual liberation, the Mahayana is the vehicle for the liberation of all. The aspiration is not just for oneself, but for all sentient beings. And one of the main practices that we do at the Dharma Center of the Mahayana tradition is called Tonglen, or sending and receiving. It's a compassion practice in which we use the same breath awareness that we learned in shamatha, but we place an intention on the breath. When we breathe out, we think we're giving goodness to sentient beings. We meditate on the idea of giving goodness to sentient beings. When we breathe in, we think we remove suffering from sentient beings. And in doing this, we begin to work with our own attitudes and begin to lessen our selfishness and increase our selflessness. And in so doing, we increase our capacity to be of benefit to ourselves and others. We increase our capacity to practice those 6 perfect virtues of generosity, ethics, patience, and all the rest. But the Buddha didn't stop there. He continued to teach. And then the further teachings that he gave became known as the Vajrayana, the vehicle of the indestructible mind. The first 2 yanas, the Hinayana and the Mahayana, come from the sutras, the spoken words of the Buddha in specific places and times with specific audiences. The Vajrayana begins with the Mahayana motivation, but the practices that the Buddha taught in the Tantras are added as a way of helping us work with our indestructible Buddha nature, our indestructible mind, and to work with them directly. In the 2 sutra paths, the Hinayana and the Mahayana, we think of our Buddha nature as being something that is sort of hidden beneath the surface. And after we begin to peel away the layers of negativity and the layers of karmic accumulation and so on, when we begin to do that, then we can find the Buddha nature within. But in the practices of the Vajrayana, we relate to our Buddha nature directly, either through one of 2 paths, through the path of liberation or through the path of skillful means. The path of liberation is our forms of deep penetrating insight meditation, into insight into the nature of our minds. And this type of practice in our tradition of the Karma Kagyu is called Mahamudra meditation, meditating on the nature of mind through Mahamudra. And the path of skillful means it includes such practices as the practice of mantra and visualization, which is a way of symbolically meditating upon the nature of mind as Buddha. By visualizing ourselves as a Buddha or bodhisattva, we relate to our Buddha nature directly, instead of it being a potential that is sort of buried beneath the surface that will someday be uncovered, as is taught in the sutra tradition. We relate to the Buddha nature directly through the practice of mantra and visualization. His Holiness the Dalai Lama was giving a teaching about this in 2006 at our home monastery at Karmatriana Dharma Chakra in Woodstock, New York. And he said, if someone tries to learn Mahamudra and they are told to meditate on the nature of their mind as emptiness and luminosity, he said they may not even know how to begin to practice like that. But he said, if you tell the person, the same person, meditate on yourself as a body of Chenrezig made of light and empty inside, he said they could do that. They could conceive of themselves as a Buddha made of light and empty on the inside. And he said, and in that way, he said they can symbolically meditate on the emptiness of the body through the visualized form of the Buddha being empty inside, and yet the mind's luminosity by meditating on the body being made of light. And he said that's a symbolic meditation on the nature of mind. And he said by doing this symbolic meditation on the nature of mind, he said, what do you do at the end of one of these symbolic meditations? He said, you dissolve the body of Chenrezig into utter emptiness and then rest there, allowing the practitioner the opportunity to rest in the true nature of mind. So these practices of the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana all come together at the Dharma Center, because our main Vajrayana practice is the combination of Chenrezig practice and Mahamudra practice. So that's a little bit of a tour through the practices of the Karma Thegsum Chöling, the Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana practices that we do as a group and as individual practitioners, and a little bit about how Chenrezig fits in. So sorry, that was a lot of information, but I'm going to take some time here to see if there are any questions about the three yanas, about the practice of Chenrezig as a Vajrayana practice, and so on. Questions, curiosities?
Yeah, Lama Kathy.
Yes.
Hello. I just wanted to mention one thing I've heard, excuse me, a couple times recently is His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he teaches recently, he's sort of stopped being shy about talking about the connection between himself and Chenrezig, and it seems now that he's in his 80s, he's pretty much directly coming. I don't know if he exactly says, I am Chenrezig, but comes pretty close in saying this, connection between him and Chenrezig, that this is for real, and you should be aware of that and respect that. So I think that's rather remarkable. We talk about Chenrezig, that apparently he's, walking around on this earth with us.
Yeah. It's very touching, isn't it, to see the life of the 14th Dalai Lama and see and imagine, that is he 80 now?
87.
Oh my heavens. Well, just what a remarkable life and what a remarkable teacher and what a remarkable idea of a person living their entire life to benefit others. And it's very touching. And to see how, as the head of state, when he escaped from Tibet to go into exile, how he guided his people in their exile and then abdicated to make his government into a representative republic. And it's really amazing. And so I think that as teachers age, they change and evolve as teachers, and it's not surprising. It's just not surprising. And it's very touching to know that he is still teaching at this age and reaching out to people and giving them hope and also valuable teachings. So I'm very happy to hear that he's being very frank with people and very inspiring.
It's on his website that he gave a Chenrezig initiation pretty recently to, like, I don't know, 70,000 people or something like that. And I haven't experienced the whole thing, but I watched a little bit at the beginning, and then that he made that statement at that time. And then I guess probably everybody knows, but he always likes to recite that verse, like you were saying, about the vow of Avalokiteshvara to remain in samsara forever. And His Holiness recites the verse saying, "I too shall remain." And he's just sort of very matter of fact about it. Sort of like, I eat lunch every day, something like that.
Right. Yeah. That particular verse is from chapter 10 of the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. As long as space exists, as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. And it's a really, really powerful statement, and it's very, very inspiring. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Are there any other questions, comments?
Lama Kathy, did you say when the Dalai Lama was at KTD in 2006? He was at KTD in 2000?
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. He gave a teaching in the courtyard of the unfinished residence wing, because the residence wing wasn't completed until I think somewhere between 2009 and 2010. And he actually gave the Chenrezi empowerment. And again, he made these remarks before giving the Chenrezi empowerment. And of course, he was a lot more circumspect at that time. Well, people say that I'm Chenrezi, so okay, here we are. And but I really appreciate the fact that he was there at KTD and he gave the empowerment, and so many of us felt that blessing, of being in his presence. Everybody who has met him talks about how when you're in front of him, you are the only person who exists as far as he's concerned. And it's just his compassion is laser focused on whoever is in front of him. It's really amazing.
Wasn't Khenpo Karthar like that also?
He really did have an incredible presence to him. And I knew people who told me that when they walked into Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's presence, they got like weak in the knees, and they began to cry because they had just never encountered such a loving being before, and it was a little bit more than they were ready for. It's just their reaction even surprised themselves. But that's what he was like. He was just so full of love and compassion that it really affected everybody who came into his presence. Time for one more.
I think there's a DVD. I don't know if it's still available, but I believe there's a DVD that people could see of the the Dalai Lama's visit to KTD?
Yes, that's correct. I believe it's an anthology of clips of various types. Yes, that's correct. There's a book. I know the book exists, and oh no, I take it back. The book is the one that's short, that's like a short anthology of photographs and anecdotes. But I do believe the video is a little more complete. It has, I think, excerpts of his talks, because he gave a talk on the in the town as well, the town of Woodstock. So thank you for that. One last thing, does anybody else have something they'd like to say? Well, okay then. The next time we talk, between now and the next time we talk, I'll provide you with a link. Let me do that for you right now before I forget. To a short practice of Chenrezig that includes the visualizations. So you don't have to wait until our meeting next time to learn about Chenrezig and how to practice. This will be it'll be a crash course, but I think you'll enjoy. You'll enjoy seeing these. And here it comes. Oh, thank you for those. Thank you for that, Lisa. Appreciate that. And okay, very good. Okay, and so that little link in the chat is a link to the teaching on Chenrezig that that I gave that Kemper Rinpoche asked me to put down. He said just use this one, and it's the easiest one to learn. So that's the visualization. And so what we'll do the next time when we're together is, now that I've discussed the history and the iconography, we can begin to talk about the purpose of deity practice, and a little bit more in depth about how deity practice is a transformation of our mundane ideas of body, speech, and mind into an awakened body, speech, and mind, and how that transformation is enacted through the practice of deity meditation. So we'll talk about the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha and our body, speech, and mind, and how those work together in mantra practice. That's what we'll talk about next time. And then we'll just keep answering questions. So if you have other questions about deity practice and why we do it, you can write them all down and send them to our hosts at Santa Monica KTC, and they will make sure we get those answered the next time we're together. So because I want to make sure that I give you the hour and so forth, and not take you too late, we'll go ahead and stop here. But I'm really, thanks again for inviting me to come.